I'm sure everything is running smooth in Pittsburgh with Penguins training camp as we welcome their outstanding radio voice, Josh Getzoff. Hey, Josh, welcome back to the program. Can you give me the vibe around the brand new training camp in Pittsburgh? I'm sure it's got to be excitement.
Yeah, Rod, thank you, and great to be back with you again. I think excitement probably is the correct word when it comes to the vibe here in Pittsburgh right now. And that starts at the top. I mean, it began with Kyle Dubas coming on board earlier this summer as the president of hockey operations and the general manager. And then you talk about the moves that he made within his department, the moves that he made within his lineup, and the roster additions here. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of optimism. And I think those are probably the two buzzwords that kind of highlight this day one of training camp here today.
Well, I'll tell you what, how much of a boost is it going to be? Obviously, you mentioned the general manager, but Erik Karlsson as well. Like, I'm talking like a jump up in the standings. You guys missed last year, cost some people their jobs. What's the expectation this year, do you think, with the Norris Trophy winner coming into town?
Well, anytime you can add a Norris Trophy winner, I think that immediately your expectations get lifted, even if you didn't make the playoffs last year. But to add a guy like Erik Karlsson, who's headed to the Hockey Hall of Fame when it's all said and done, 100-point season last year, there's a lot of reason for excitement. And for me, the biggest reason for excitement is because you look at this Penguins blue line now, Rod, and between him and Chris Letang, it's reasonable to think that 2+ periods of the game are going to have those two guys on the ice, one or the other. So you have two just incredibly dynamic, offensively gifted, but also really great skating and puck-moving defensemen that are both on that right side, one after the other. Whether it's Karlsson Letang or Letang Karlsson, the options are there for Mike Sullivan, and I think that makes the Penguins a better team because they love to, they love defensemen that can make that first pass and stretch the ice. Those two guys do it incredibly well, and you know what, quite honestly, they can also just drive the offense themselves and carry it the length of the ice, as we've seen both do time and time again. So the options are aplenty, and I think the two guys that will be next to them, whether it's Ryan Graves and Chris Letang, or Ryan Graves and Erik Karlsson, or Marcus Pedersen and Chris Letang, or Marcus Pedersen and Erik Karlsson, those two guys are going to be shouldering a heavier load than they have in the past. But I think that they're both up for it. And that top four of the Penguins on paper looks really good. And it starts to put the pieces in place that you hope will be not only a return to the postseason, but maybe some success after that as well.
They know hockey in Pittsburgh, obviously. They've had a team for a real long time. So they would know who Erik Karlsson was. Could you just, I know you probably don't want to look back, but what was the feel in town when the trade was made? Because that's not a small tweak to a roster that missed the playoffs last year.
No, it's not. And I can tell you there were the rumors, I believe, right before the draft that something might go down. And even on the first day of free agency, that Kyle Dubas was close to striking a trade with Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks. But it kind of, it wasn't that it dissipated. I think the excitement and the hope was there. But you hadn't really heard anything for a few weeks, and you're starting to get into the dog days of August. And then all of a sudden, bang, that trade goes down on a Saturday. I believe it was the first Saturday of August, early in the month. And you look at the trade. First of all, when you see that kind of a move, you wonder what's going the other way, because this is obviously, as we mentioned, a dynamic player, a player that changes the whole, perspective of your team, honestly. And for the Penguins to move away what they felt were, salaries that could not only help them in their cap situation, but also give other guys opportunities in their lineup, and Jeff Petrie and Jan Ruda and Mikhail Granlund, and throw a couple picks in there, which are understandable given what you're acquiring. I think you still look at that trade, Rod, and it's not any question. The best player in the trade was Erik Karlsson. The best player in the trade's coming to the Penguins. So it was masterfully done by Kyle Dubas, and it really gave this team a serious shot in the arm of excitement, but then also swagger, because you get a guy like Erik Karlsson, he comes on board, and he just brings immediate credibility. He brings immediate respect. And he changes a little bit of the dynamic behind closed doors in the dressing room, too, which is not always a bad thing, especially when, as you mentioned, you missed the playoffs last year.
No doubt. Since we're in training camp, what are the stories? How many jobs are open? What are you watching this week and in the preseason?
Yeah, you know what? I got to say, this is as busy of a training camp as the Penguins have had probably in the last 5 or 6 years. And I say that because there's a lot of jobs up for grabs. It's, Karlsson is here, Riley Smith is here, Lars Eller is here, Noel Achari, Matt Nieto. There are a lot of additions by Kyle Dubas to his roster. But where I look around is there's certain positions that have the battles going on. And that's not always been the case the last couple of years. But for this Penguins team, I mentioned the top 4 defensemen. There'll be some combination, if they're all healthy, of Ryan Graves, Chris Letang, Marcus Pedersen, and Erik Karlsson. That's set. It's just a matter of who's playing with who. This third defensive pair is where it gets a little interesting, and that's going to be one of the big competitions here in camp. They brought in Mark Pesic and Libor Hayek on PTOs, but they also have P.O. Joseph, who had a really nice season last year as his first full NHL year. Ty Smith, who came over, a former first-round pick from New Jersey in the John Marino deal. They have Chad Ruedel here, who's always been a steady depth defenseman for the Penguins. Mark Friedman, ditto to that. So there are pieces here that are battling for that spot. And then you go to the forward group, and I think it still needs to be decided as to what that bottom 6 is going to look like. And even in the top 6, with no Jake Gensel for the first, Kyle Dubas has put the number at 5 games that he's hoping he misses. But even if it's 5, that's 2 weeks of the season that you're into right there. They need to figure out who's going to be up with Sidney Crosby to start the season. Based on what we saw today, and of course the caveat being it's day 1, Vinny Hinostroza actually was the guy skating with Sidney Crosby and Brian Russ. So there's a lot to still be decided. You haven't even played a preseason game yet. But those are some of the aspects of camp that make it a lot more intriguing as far as the competition and the spots up for grabs, as you mentioned, than maybe we'd seen in the past.
Well, that is a wonderful update. And Josh, we'll let you get back to work. I appreciate the time. And when you come through Sunrise, I'll give you a nudge in the press box. Have a great season.
Looking forward to it, Rod. We'll see you down there. And hopefully we'll bring some sun with us, although I don't know if we have to do that much work down there.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Josh. Josh Getzoff, the voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins.